Good evening. Thank you for your patience as we made sure that the live stream is working appropriately. Thank you for joining us this evening for the parent preview for Play It Safe. As you can see from the presentation, on February 21st, the Board of Trustees, they adopted the Marble Falls ISD School Health Advisory Council's recommendation regarding the opt-in curriculum materials in regards to the prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. The state of Texas had passed a law that had stated that the SHAC, the School Health Advisory Councils for local school districts, needed to review the curriculum materials in collaboration with the school districts and then make a recommendation. And so tonight what you will see is you will see a parent preview from the adopted materials that were chosen. And what was chosen was Play It Safe, and for us to present in collaboration with the Hill Country Children's Advocacy Center, who are experts in this area. Parents must opt in for their children to participate in this instruction, and permission forms have been sent home. If you have not received a permission form, if you will, you can go ahead and contact your campus counselor or your child's teacher, and we can make sure that you receive one. My name is Yarda Lefflet. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction in Marble Falls ISD. I have the pleasure of introducing Erica Melton. Erica is from the Hill Country Children's Advocacy Center. She's the Education Outreach Coordinator. She is the person who comes around to the campuses and presents to your children. And so we're going to let Erica take it from here to go ahead and show us what Play It Safe is all about.
How about that? Anybody hear me now? Okay, awesome. All right, thank you, Yarda, for that awesome introduction. My name is Erica Melton. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator at Hill Country Children's Advocacy Center. When I get to go to schools, I introduce myself as saying that I have this really cool job where I get to go around to schools and teach kids from pre-K all the way up to high school about different ways to keep them safe. So when they're really little, we go really basic, and then as they get older, we start talking about things that really matter in their lives that don't necessarily affect kindergartners. So as they get older, it kind of matures with them. So today what we're going to do is we're going to do a little parent preview, get you to understand first why we do this, why we have this type of education through our schools, why we want to come in and have this curriculum come through your school this year. And in order to do that, we need to kind of look at the statistics for child abuse. So we're going to look at this test. It's called the Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE test. We're going to kind of dig into it just a little bit to get a better understanding of the ACE test. And then from the ACE test, we start to learn that this is really prevalent, and it doesn't matter what kind of community if we're in, if we're low income, high income, that child abuse doesn't it doesn't look at gender or ethnicity or nationality or anything like that. It is just wide, and it's everywhere. Okay, it's very prominent. So we also can see through the ACE test, we'll find out that it really affects them as they get older. So if a child has been abused, whether physically or in a sexual abuse manner, how it can really affect them when they get older. So we need to prevent it instead of letting it happen and then trying to fix it in the tail end. Then we're going to talk about the Play It Safe curriculum. I'm going to just give you the main points for it. Really, when we're talking about elementary school, that's mainly what they're going to be getting into. And then I'll kind of explain as they get a little older what we build into it. And then I'm going to kind of explain the video details. So for you parents that are here today, you're going to be able to get to watch the video, which is great. For those of you who are watching on the live stream, you will have to go to the Play It Safe website in order to be able to watch the video. It's encrypted, so I can't send the video to y'all, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail when we get to that point too. But if you're here, awesome, we get to be able to look at the videos. So let's get started. So like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about is the statistics, because we need to figure that part out, right? 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. That number's huge. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will have been sexually abused before they turn 18. And this is just the numbers that we know. So these are the kids who have come forward and said that somebody physically abused them, somebody sexually abused them, somebody neglected them, okay? Or a parent or a teacher or some other adult saw something, had some suspicion or feeling that maybe something was going on and reported for that child. But this number could be so much bigger, we just don't know. There's so many people, there's so many adults now who were abused as children, and they either went to somebody and said, something's happening to me, and they either told them to not tell anybody, we got to keep it a secret, we got to keep it quiet, we don't want to affect what's going on in our community and our family, or they were threatened by the person that was abusing them. Either threatened to their life, or threatened that the child was going to go to jail, or that it was going to ruin the family. And so that child kept that secret inside of them instead of going out and telling somebody and getting the help that they need. 65% of all cases that are handled by CACs, so Children's Advocacy Centers, involve child sexual abuse. It's a big number. 25% of children who are not old enough even for kindergarten when they experience this abuse. That's 1 in 4 kids. 95% of children know their perpetrator. That means that for the 25% of the children who are old, not even old enough for kindergarten, that means that they are living in this life with their families and they think that every other family's like this. Every other family deals with the same things that they're dealing with because they're not old enough to be able to go to somebody's house and really experience what's going on in somebody else's household and how that family dynamic works. So they don't know to ask for help. They just think this is kind of normal. Like everybody's mom does this, or everybody's dad does this, or everybody's grandpa, or everybody's uncle or aunt, or whoever it is, right? And then that 95% of children, that's also a little scary number because 95% of the time, this child knows this person. They love, they trust, they care for this person. They just don't like what this person is doing to them. So it's kind of, it's very hard for them to go through that and deal with, well, I love this person, and I don't really want to see him go to jail, or I don't want to see anything bad happen to them. I just want them to stop hurting me. And so for a child, that's really hard for them to comprehend and weigh those two options. And it's almost like they sacrifice their self-worth in order to keep that person okay, just because they love them, instead of looking inside and saying, I need the help that they really do. So I mentioned the adverse childhood experiences. I'm going to explain a little bit why it's so important. This is a big piece of why I feel like prevention is so important. And obviously the doctors who have studied these adverse childhood experiences believe it as well. Adverse childhood experiences, or the ACE test, was developed by actually a nutritionist, a weight loss doctor. He had a bunch of patients lose an enormous amount of weight, and then within 6 to 9 months come back and regain it all. And so he started to kind of question, why is that happening? I don't understand why we keep, they lost the weight and then they're regaining it. So he started to ask them some questions, and some of those questions were like, what happened to you when you were a kid? What was going on? And 55% of those people came back and said that they were sexually abused as a child. So he started to figure out, okay, well, is that it? Is that the only thing that bothers us? Is that the only thing that could affect our health and our future? Or is it other things that are going on in a child's life that we don't even think about as adults that could potentially harm them mentally and physically in their health as they get older? So when the adverse childhood experiences came out, there's about 11 or 12 questions. And the questions go along, they ask the questions, and basically those are any traumatic experiences that occur before a child reaches the age of 18. So the questions are, before you turned 18, did this happen? Before you turned 18, did this happen? Right? So some of those things were parental substance abuse. Was one of your parents that lived in the household with you addicted to drugs or alcohol? Did you have that involved in your family? Was there a family member in your household that was incarcerated before you turned 18 years old? Were you a witness to domestic violence in the household before you turned 18 years old? Did you have a parent with mental illness? Did your parents go through a divorce or bad co-parenting situations? Was there a lot of that just dynamic that just seemed a little bit more stressful for a child? And like I said, divorce and sometimes that mental illness of maybe it's OCD or it's PTSD or anything that might feel like, or postpartum disorder, they don't feel like enormous to us because we deal with them on a regular basis, depression, anxiety, things like that, but our children can feel that. So when a child is going through that, they wanted to see, would that affect somebody from when they were a child experiencing that to now when they're an adult? Does that bother them? Does that affect them? So these questions that they ask fall under these three categories. Either abuse, which is the obvious, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Then there's the neglect of the physical and emotional. And then you also have that household dysfunction. Is that mental illness, the incarceration, the domestic violence, the divorce, and that addiction atmosphere. So they found that there was a lot of health risks that were linked to these ACEs. So the more ACEs or the more yeses that an adult said on that test, the more likely they kind of fell under some of these health issues that were linked to them. So we find that a lot of people who've had those stressors as a child tend to have more those behavioral activities where it's that lack of physical activity, the smoking addictions, the alcoholism, the drug use, and then the constant missing work or not being able to keep a job. And then that physical and mental health, which is the obesity, STDs, broken bones, stroke, cancer, those things, self-harm, suicide attempts, and heart disease. Wouldn't it be great if we could just kind of get rid of some of this stuff in our lives? If our future, the future generation for our children could link and they could just kind of forget about half of this stuff, it would be amazing. The world that we could create if we could just prevent our children from having to go through these stressors. The only problem is that we just don't quite know what our children are really absorbing because maybe they're not around or they don't really get involved, but they're listening. They're constantly listening and they're constantly involved whether we feel like they are or not. So when we find with prevention, if we can prevent any of these 11 questions, any of those 11 ACEs that were asked on that test, huge reductions in a lot of these problems. 44% reduction in adults with depression. Oh my God. What a world if we could have less mental health struggles. 33% of reduction in the number of adults who smoke. And we're adding vaping into that. 24 to 27% reduction in the number of adults with respiratory problems like asthma and COPD. 16% reduction in kidney disease, 15% reduction in adults who are unemployed. Adults who are able to work hard and be good adults and make good choices and make change in this world when they don't have anything hindering them or holding them back. We can't let it happen and then try to fix it on the tail end. We have to prevent it. The only way we can prevent it is to empower them to know that they have control of that. When the CAC gets involved, I'm going to kind of explain what we do in our processes. Does anybody know where the Children's Advocacy Center is or anything about what we do there? Okay. So the CAC is in Burnet. The Children's Advocacy for the Hill Country is in Burnet, Texas. We are right in between Shady Grove and R.J. Ritchie. So if you're familiar with 963, we're that house with the blue roof and the blue pinwheel. We built our building to look like a house so that it's very, very welcoming for a child. It doesn't look like a hospital, doesn't smell like a hospital, doesn't look like a police station or smell like a police station. It's welcoming. They feel like they can come in and be able to talk. When there aren't CACs in communities, that left graph is what happens. We're living in a world where if the child is going through some sort of abuse, they go and disclose it to somebody, they outcry to a parent or an adult or a teacher, anybody. Without the CAC, they get pulled from place to place to place. They got to tell their story to law enforcement. They got to go to the hospital. They got to go to therapy. They got to pull here. We got to pull there. We got to pull the justice system. And that child isn't really the center of attention in that situation. I'm going to give you an example of what happens when there's not a CAC. The child goes to a teacher and says, something happened to me. And when teachers are being taught non-CAC stuff, they might ask for a full story because they just want to kind of know what's going on. So that child tells that full story of what happened. Now that teacher knows that that child needs help. So that teacher's going to take that child to the counselor. Okay, little Johnny, go tell the counselor what you just told me. And now that child has to tell that story again. That's 2 times. Counselor has the child go to the principal. Little Johnny, tell the principal what you just told me. That's 3 stories. Now we feel like it's an emergency, so we have to call law enforcement. So the police get there. Tell the police what you just told me. That's 4 stories. Now CPS needs to get involved. That's 5 stories. Now that child needs to go to the hospital and get evaluated. That's 6 stories. And then that child has to stand in front of their abuser in court and testify and tell that story again. That's 7 stories. I mean, that's just off the top of my head. So not only did that child actually have to live through that event, which is already horrendous enough, right? But now not only having to deal with it once, but having to retell that story, thus reliving that trauma 7 more times is absolutely unacceptable. We cannot let that happen. And they figured it out. That some kids, after 4 or 5 times, they won't talk anymore. I've told this story to 5 other teachers. Go and talk to them. I don't want to tell it anymore. Or they change the story up every single time they tell somebody because they think about new details or they think about new information or they just want to kind of get your attention because they're a kid. And so they might elaborate. And now 7 different stories. Is that going to hold up in court? Probably not. A defense attorney will eat that up when that child just needs justice. So with the CAC, what happens at our center is if a child discloses or outcries or anybody reports abuse, suspected abuse to them, if law enforcement and CPS deem it something that needs to be interviewed and needs to be investigated, that child will come to our center. Law enforcement and CPS also come. So that child doesn't need to get pulled from place to place to place. They go to one central location and everybody's there. We also have SANE nurses on staff, which are sexual assault nurse examiners. And they're able to do medical evaluations so that child doesn't have to go to the hospital where it's scary and be able to do it all in the same place. And what we do is we interview them with our forensic interviewers. We have highly skilled, highly trained forensic interviewers that ask the child open-ended questions. So instead of asking for yes or no answers from them, they ask that child to tell their story. They only have to, yes, they have to tell that story, but they tell it once. It's on recording, it's on audio and video recording, so that child doesn't actually have to stand in front of their abuser and testify in court. They play that video for the jury and for the courtroom so that that child doesn't have to be there if they don't want to be. That's all they need. That's the evidence that they need. And so when it's recorded, the interviewer is in the room with the child, and then in a separate room, we have law enforcement and CPS watching live, in real time, listening and able to hear and see what's going on. So if they have follow-up questions, they're able to ask it now instead of letting that child leave and then having to bring them back and then leaving and make them come back. So we can actually find more bad guys doing this because they might mention an uncle that comes over every once in a while, and that person might have a warrant that they've been looking for months. And now we found them. We just needed to know where that person kind of hung out. So we can get a lot more information from a child when they're comfortable, when they're able to actually sit there and be able to tell their story. That's the beauty of the CAC. So I'm going to kind of really quickly just tell you who all works there and what who we work with. So we work with 19 law enforcement jurisdictions, 2 DA offices, 5 county attorneys' offices, 3 CPS field offices, including Region 7, medical professionals, and mental health professionals. Our staff at the center are forensic interviewers. We have 1 that's bilingual, so can speak English and Spanish, and then we have 2 that speak English only. We have SANE nurses on contract. So like I said, they come in, they're able, if law enforcement and CPS say that this needs to be something that has to be done, the nurses will be there at the same time as law enforcement and CPS. So SANE nurse, like I said, is sexual assault nurse examiner. They're able to examine a child 120 hours after the last time they saw the abuser. Whereas if they go to the hospital, they only have about 48 hours, 48 to 72 hours. So with this, they have 5 full days to be able to examine and get the evidence that they need from that child. They do internal and external examinations in the comfort of our center rather than having to go to a hospital. We have our MDT coordinator who fields to make sure that everybody, law enforcement, CPS, and our center and our mental health and our like medical professionals are able to be there at the same time. We make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all being fluid and that nobody is missing anything. There's no miscommunication. Then we have our therapists. They're our trauma-informed therapists. So once a child interviews at our center, then they may qualify for our trauma-informed therapy, which means that this therapist helps them work through that trauma and through the triggers that this trauma may cause. Because smells, sounds, things, anything could cause a child to have a triggering episode because of what happened to them. And if 2 years down the line, they actually have to go and testify or they want to go and do a victim impact statement in front of their abuser, they need to be able to prepare for that because that's a big deal. That's really hard. Can't imagine. Just think about a 5-year-old having to go up and tell their abuser that what they did to them and that they're not going to let that change them, that it's just a chapter in their life, it's not their story. Then we have our program assistant that pretty much umbrellas everybody and makes sure that everybody's on the same page with everything. And then there's me, the education outreach coordinator, by myself. It's just me. So everybody else from program assistant up is all reactive. Everybody else at the center, their job kicks in once the abuse has happened or once the report has been made. I am the only one that's prevention. This is kind of a new world that we're living in when it comes to the children's advocacy centers because not every center has an education outreach coordinator, but they're starting to learn that if we can prevent it, then maybe we can stop it, eradicate it completely. And that starts with having the awareness and that conversation of, I'm not going to be afraid to talk about it because when we talk about it, the bad guys don't go to places that people talk about it. The bad guys go to places that we're just gonna pretend it doesn't happen here. We're just gonna turn our eye to it. So when we have that conversation, we bring that awareness up, then we're able to show the community that we're paying attention and that we're watching. And so when those bad guys try to get involved into the community, they realize people are watching and they're going to leave. The really cool thing about the CAC is we are an independent nonprofit agency, which means all of our services are provided free of charge to the family. So this is the interview, this is our advocates. I didn't mention the advocates, but they're crisis management, which means that they help through all of the, if a parent comes in, their whole world is crumbling around them because their child is going through this. Because not only is their child being hurt, but maybe we're breaking from a 2-income household down to a 1-income household. Or maybe we had to put a restraining order and we had to flee. So now we got to figure out where they're going to live, where the kids are going to go to school, how are they going to eat. A lot of times when you're going through those high roller coaster of emotion, stress situations, you can't process that thought clearly enough to be able to say, okay, I got to do this and I got to make a list. So our advocates help work through that. We'll apply for things for you. We'll be able to get all the information that a person needs to make sure that they are able to go back to a normal life as quickly as they can, as much as they can. And then all the way down to me. All of my services are provided free of charge. So the school doesn't have to pay a single dime for me to be here. I am paid federally, federal grant, and nothing comes out of the school. All of the supplies, all of my time, all of the equipment, everything that we have, it's completely free for all the districts that I serve. All right, so let's talk about Play It Safe. That's why we're here, right? So it's important for us to understand first why we're here before we figure out what's important about this class. This curriculum is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I just finished teaching it today at Bertram Elementary. I'm on day 2 of 4 there, and the kids just love it. They have a great time. I never sit in a classroom where I have kids just completely silent. And you would think when we're talking about uncomfortable topics like this that maybe I can't get people to talk, but oh, they will talk. We get into conversations, good conversations. So when we do Play It Safe, it goes from pre-K all the way up to high school. So we talk about different things when we're dealing with the younger kids. It's like I said, it's very basic, and then we build up and mature as the child matures. As you can see in this picture here, we have 2 dolls, and I have them here. This is what I do with my friends. So I'll say, this is Joe. Does everybody want to say hi to Joe? There you go. And then this is Susie. You want to say hi to Susie? And so we show Joe and Susie for pre-K all the way up to 2nd grade. 3rd grade and up, they don't get to see the dolls. Sometimes they miss them, and they wish they could come out, and sometimes I just let them kind of sit with us. But they help me out with some stories, and then they help me out to explain some of the more detailed parts with the confusing touch, which I'll mention in a little bit. Also, you see the booklets that are on the PowerPoint as well. Those are my scripts. So this is built with a script. Now, I've been teaching this long enough that I don't need to look at the script anymore, but this is actually what it is. So here is all the way up to 5th grade. So that's what I teach. Down, flat out script. I don't go off the beaten path. I don't say anything that's outside the norm of what they've approved. We go strictly down the book with them. But like I said, I've been doing it so long that I know exactly what I need to say and how to say it, and I don't really have to look at it anymore, which is great. And then at the bottom, you can see the DVDs. Back then, we had DVDs. Now I have USBs, and I also have the website. So we always have plan Bs and all the options in case technology decides to fail us for the day. But no matter what, your child will get some one-on-one conversation with me as well as the video. And every video, every grade is a little different. Pre-K and kindergarten get to meet TikTok the watchdog, which is the dog on the scripts. And then as they get older, they get more mature with them. So these are, okay. So these are the main topics that are reinforced within each grade. So this is pre-K all the way up to high school. Okay, the first thing that we talk about is the 3 different kinds of touch. So I'm going to kind of just say it the way that I say it to the kiddos. Just makes it a little bit easier. So safe touches are touches that make us feel loved and cared for inside. These are ones that we get from our parents or people that take care of us, our grandparents, maybe even for our friends. They make us feel proud and that we can be proud for our friends or the people that we love. And then I ask them for examples. So they'll raise their hand and they'll say hugs or kisses or cuddles or pats on the back or fist bumps or high fives or elbow bumps. We did that a lot during COVID. The fist bumps so we don't spread germs, right? Or elbow bumps so we don't spread germs. Then we have our unsafe touches. Unsafe touches are touches that hurt, and that pain lasts a long time, and it leaves marks like welts, bruises, bumps, burns. This could cause us to bleed or even have broken bones. And then I'll ask for some examples of those. That's kicking, punching, slapping, hitting, pinching, biting. That's hair pulling. Anything that leaves a mark and that pain lasts a long time. And these are the ones we usually get in trouble for doing when we do it to our friends at school. So that actually reinforces that unsafe touch world for a conversation for teachers. So if a teacher's sitting while we're having this conversation, they can reinforce that and use that when they see a child giving another child an unsafe touch. Like, remember, we cannot be giving unsafe touches to our friends. And they understand what that unsafe touch is because they went through the curriculum. We do clarify the difference between an unsafe touch and a spanking, so that in case we are living in a world where maybe spanking is something that we do at home, you don't have to be worried about that they're going to come home and say, you abused me because you spanked me. When they're little, I use the dolls to explain that. I tell stories with my dolls. I say something about Joe took a bike from his friend's house even though he didn't ask, and then Joe gets a spanking, just like this. And then everybody giggles. It cracks me up that the kids giggle at that. Maybe it's my facial expression behind. But then I tell them that it's on their bottom when it's a spanking. It's on their bottom, and yes, sometimes it's painful in the beginning, but that pain goes away pretty quickly. And sometimes it's just more embarrassing to get spanked because maybe you got spanked in front of your friends, and that's like the most embarrassing thing ever, and they all giggle. And then it's meant to help you learn a lesson. So we usually get spanked because we got in trouble, we made a mistake, and then we have to learn from that. And then I mentioned that unsafe touches are a little different in that someone may call it a spanking, but if it's on your legs, your arms, your chest, your stomach, your back, or your face, and it leaves marks like we talked about, like the welts or the broken bones or the bruises or the causes bleeding, and that pain lasts a long time, then that's not a spanking anymore. That's considered an unsafe touch, and that's not okay. So we decipher between the two. And then we talk about confusing touch. Now, I mention unwanted touch in this, and just for this only. I don't mention it to the kiddos. And the reason why I mention it to you is I have another program called Rad Kids. And so if I have a rad kid in my class, they use unwanted touch in their curriculum. That's their verbiage. So if you see me walking around doing rad kid stuff, I might say unwanted, but confusing and unwanted go hand in hand. We use confusing and play it safe. So confusing touches don't hurt like a kick or a punch, but they don't make us feel loved or cared for inside either. Confusing touches happen when somebody, could be someone your own age, someone younger, someone older, tries to touch, take a picture of, or look at a child's private parts for no reason, or that person asks a child to look at, touch, or take a picture of that person's private parts for no good reason. Now, private parts are special parts of our body that we keep covered by a bathing suit when we go swimming. So my friends Joe and Susie actually wore their bathing suits here today to help us learn this lesson. Now, to distract from the fact that I am pulling his pants down, because I used to have them all giggle at that, I say, okay, what color is Joe's bathing suit? So that kind of detracts them, right? And they'll go green. I say, okay, well, boys wear bathing suit bottoms. Sometimes they wear a top just to kind of cover from the sun. We don't want to get sunburned sometimes, right? But boys' private parts are in the front and in the back. And girls wear a two-piece because girls have 3 private parts. So what color is Susie's bathing suit? Purple. Thank you. All right, so girls' private parts are 3 in the front, top and bottom, and in the back and the bottom. Now, no one has the right to look at, take a picture of, or touch a child's private parts for no good reason. So if I'm saying no good reason, that must mean that there has to be some reasons why someone would need to look at or touch a child's private parts. When they're little, I kind of feed it to them because they might not get to that point. But 3rd, 4th, 5th, they usually know the answers. Okay? So we talk about the doctor. They have to go to the doctor every year. They go to a well visit. They make sure that they're up to date on their shots. They have to get weighed and measured, right? And sometimes a doctor needs to look at or touch a child's private parts to make sure that everything's developing the way that it should. It's never a secret, and you're always in the same room with the person who brought you to the doctor, whether it's a parent or a grandparent or whoever brought you there. And it's never meant to make you feel uncomfortable. Now, we have children who still need help taking a shower or a bath. When they're really little, they definitely need help. When they're like 2nd and 3rd, they're like, no, I don't need help anymore. But sometimes they leave a little soap in their hair, right? And I can usually get to them that way. So I say, do you ever leave soap in your hair and let your hair dry and then your hair gets really itchy? Well, that's sometimes parents want to make sure that you get rinsed off all the way. Because leaving soap on your body can sometimes create that itch, and we don't want you to be itchy, right? And we also want to teach you how to shower and bathe so that you clean all the way. Because if you have dirt and spots, like maybe you didn't get your pets enough and you're a little stinky down there, we want to make sure that you know how to clean yourself so that you don't get an infection or get sick, because that could be bad. And they all agree. The last one that we talk about is babies. Babies wear diapers, and diapers get stinky. So why do babies wear diapers? And then we kind of talk about the fact that they can't go to potty on their own. So moms, dads, grandparents, babysitters, sometimes big brothers and sisters have to help change a baby's diaper, because if we don't change a baby's diaper fast enough or as often enough as we should, then maybe a baby gets a diaper. Yeah, good job. So they might get a diaper rash or get an infection, and then sometimes if it's so bad, it's really hard for them to be able to get better from that. And we don't want babies to get really bad rashes or get an infection and get sick, right? So they say, yeah. So we clarify to make sure that if they have a little brother or sister at home, they're not going to be pointing at mom and dad and saying you're giving him a confusing touch or her a confusing touch, because that's not right, right? We got to make sure that they understand that when a person is involving themselves to make sure that someone is clean and healthy, that that's okay. But if a person ever says to a child that it's a secret or a game, that's not a safe secret to keep, and that's not a safe game to play, right? So that's pretty much where we go with the 3 different types of touch. Then we talk about the 3-part safety rule. We actually build a 3-part safety rule into so many different options. We can talk about strangers with this. We can talk about if someone gives us an unsafe or confusing touch, we can use the 3-part safety rule. We can even use the 3-part safety rule when it comes to internet safety, which is what we discuss 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. We talk about personal information and giving out personal information to people online. They don't realize that the people that they talk to online might not be who they say they are. And they don't really get that people can change their voices. And sometimes, once I clarify that with them, you see their mouths drop. And there's a lot of like eye-opening, especially for the kids who have Snapchat. A lot of stuff in Snapchat that's a little scary. So we bring the 3-part safety rule into a lot of different aspects. So the first one is, when I do this, especially when it's for the little kids, I use my hand motions, and I also use my voice so that they can see the movements and then they actually can hear my voice as well. I do it very often within the class so that by the time we're done, I'll just say 1, 2, 3, and they can go through it on their own. So the first one is to say no. Number 2 is to get away, and they'll remember that. And then number 3 is to tell a trusted adult. So we build that a lot. Little kids, I kind of have to feed it to them a little bit in the beginning, and then they got it down by the end, and then older kids, they've got it. So when we talk about this, we also have to talk about trusted adults, because I can't just leave it at trusted adults and then expect them to know what that means, right? They probably know, like, I can go talk to my mom and dad about it, or I can talk to my aunt or my grandparent, but what if the person in their life that they feel like they can trust, that they're putting under that category of trusted adult, is the one that's abusing them? They can't go to them, right? So if I don't give them a whole bunch of options, then they might feel kind of stuck in that one spot and not know how to ask outside of that. So we talk about parents, grandparents, we've got aunts and uncles, we have best friends' parents. We also, we have pastors or anybody like outside in the community, coaches, things like that, that might be somebody that we trust. And then we can also have people at school. We have our teachers, counselors, principal, assistant principal, school nurse. Sometimes they say janitor. I'm like, yeah, if you like them, go talk to them if you feel comfortable, right? So we want to give them enough options, because the issue comes up that if they talk to somebody who they feel like they can trust, but either that person doesn't quite understand or doesn't know how to help that child, then nothing gets done. And if that child feels like nothing gets done, how do they feel like they can trust the next person and the next person? So we clarify that with them. I also mention to them as they get a little older, we say things like, well, you know, if you've been told by your parent, if you do this online again and you get in trouble and get your PlayStation taken away or your phone taken away, you might feel like, oh, I can't tell mom and dad that I did this again because I made a mistake, but I'm really stuck. Some kids just feel like they're going to fix it on their own. Instead, we need to figure out another person they can talk to if they don't feel comfortable enough talking to their immediate family members. Because we think about it as we want them to be safe, but they also don't want to lose their phone or lose their PlayStation. So we kind of have to think down to where they're thinking, into their level. And the last piece that we talk about is it's never too late to tell, and because the child abuse is never their fault. This is the spiel I give at the end of every video. Most people would never think of touching a child in an unsafe or confusing way, but it has happened to some kids. So if it's ever happened to anybody in this room, what I want you to know, it's not your fault and you did not do anything wrong, which means that you can go and tell one of those trusted adults that we talked about. And it doesn't matter if it was a week ago, a month ago, 5 years ago. It's never too late to tell, because that's not your secret that you have to keep. That's not your burden to bear. They know, the people who have abused you know that as long as you keep it a secret and you keep it quiet, that they're not going to get in trouble. Do you think that they know that they're going to get in trouble? All the kids know that if that person is telling them that it's a secret or game now, that they know they're doing something wrong, which is why they're telling that child to do that. You know, when we tell our kids, listen to an adult and do whatever that adult says, there's really no gray area for them. There's no, well, if they touch me this way and make me feel uncomfortable, or if they hurt me and leave marks on me, that I'm allowed to say no. It's just black and white. It's, I was told I have to listen and do whatever they say. And so when they're sitting in that black and white world and then this type of situation happens, they don't really know how to work through it. Well, I was told I'm not allowed to, I got to do whatever they say, or I got to do whatever they tell me to do. Instead of realizing, well, if it's putting you in a situation where you feel like you're unsafe or you feel confused, then you're allowed to speak up. So this gives them the empowerment to say, yes, I'm going to respect adults and I'm going to respect the people around me, But if I feel uncomfortable and I feel like somebody's getting into my personal bubble, then I'm allowed to say stop, and I don't want you to do that. It gives that empowerment to know that they're allowed to say no. All right. So the last bit, I just really want to briefly cover these pictures over here on the right. These are the topics. These are the videos that the kids will see. So the top one is that TikTok the Watchdog. Pre-K and kindergarten get to see him. Then on the right is 5th grade. So if you have a 5th grader, that is a very mature content for them. Okay. Now, it's not something that they can't handle, but it's something that they need to see. But at the same time, if you also have a kindergartner, I don't want you to expect that your kindergartner is going to see the same thing that the 5th grader is going to see. It's obvious that as the child matures, we need to mature the conversation with them. And then the one on the bottom, it's a little goofy. It's 3rd grade. It's with, it's like that 3D, like cutout. It looks realistic, but they walk like real weird and, right? He's the baby professor, and he works through some problems with 2 of his friends that come visit. And it's very goofy. The kids laugh, and it's very uplifting. Even though the 2 kids that are coming in are saying that one says they got touched in a confusing way, and one says they got an unsafe touch from their dad. So the topics, the conversation is a little bit more, they're getting real examples, but it's not in a way that makes them feel threatened or scared. For middle school and high school, really quickly, so these topics we're going to talk about within middle school and high school. They talk about harassment and respect for each other. Then they talk about sexting and cyberbullying. We talk about healthy relationships, because it's really important for them to know that even if they grew up in an unhealthy relationship traded family, that they can unlearn those traits and be able to thrive in a healthy relationship in their future. We talk about the imbalance of power and sexual abuse. So somebody has some sort of power, whether it's age or money or just size over somebody else, doesn't mean that they're allowed to put their power over a child or somebody else. Then we talk about dating violence. We talk about non-stranger rape, which is date rape, basically. Okay, and then those pictures on the right-hand side are snippets from the videos that they watch for middle school and high school. So for those of you who are on the live stream, this is the website you would be looking at. So really, you could just go to playitsafe.org, and then you go into the parent section. You are able to watch the trailers, but the trailers are only a few seconds long. They don't really give a whole lot of information. But because I don't own the copyright to this program, I only buy the license each year. I'm not able to just give out the videos. The only time I'm able to show the videos is during the parent preview, as well as the class when I teach the kids. So if you are interested in looking at the videos and you are at home right now, you would need to rent them for $4.99 plus tax in order to be able to see them in full. But if you're really interested, that's the best way to do it, and you get to see the video that your child gets to see. For those of you tonight, you get the added bonus of being able to see the videos. So does anybody have any questions before we get to the videos? Yeah.
So as we went through the adoption of this, one of the questions that came through from various staff members as well as some parents is that they noticed that the new law says that a parent has to opt in. And they said, well, so wouldn't that mean then that if somebody is abusing their child, they could not let their child participate? And that is exactly what that means. However, the discussion that Shaq had and the counselors had and the teachers that were involved in recommending this is that we would hope that enough parents opt in that then a child who was in an unsafe environment, the other students, they would then be aware to be able to then tell a trusted adult of that. And so it is the law that everybody opts in, but just that many people wondered that as we went through the process, and so I thought I would just point that out, is that does mean that most likely an abuser will not opt in their own children into seeing the program.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, this concludes for the webinar, or for the live stream, everything that we need to present tonight. My email address is ericam@hccac.org. If you have any other questions or concerns that after you've digested this video and just kind of thought about everything and then a question kind of popped up, that'd be a perfect time to do that. I'd be happy to explain anything to you. These parent previews are meant to bring as much transparency to this program as possible. We don't want to ever make you feel like there's a hidden agenda. We don't want you to feel like we're trying to hide or put your child in a place where that we're trying to indoctrinate them into things. So the way I brought it to you and the way I presented it to you tonight is exactly the way I present it to the kids, verbatim, like down to the wire, right? So you heard exactly how I talk to your children. And that's the important part to know, is that I'm not like kind of like skipping over things and redacting things tonight to try to hide something. I'm as transparent tonight as we possibly can be. And then on top of it, being able to watch the videos is even added bonus to be able to do that. Okay? All right. Well, I guess we'll get started getting the laptops together to be able to watch the video. Are we good? Are we off the...